This is the Director's Podcast with Jeff T. Thomas, Part 2.
Like, what's your process from the moment you get the script or the concept and you write the script and you take it to, the moment you're shooting it compared to
then,
to then?
Yeah, it's very different. Like I'm sure, like you're the same, right? Like I'm sure it's worlds away from where you started, right? In terms of how you go about something. But one of the short films I did when I was, I want to say this is before I did the tournament trailer around. It was like I remember I got into this habit where. I got into the thing that I just mentioned, actually, where you always feel like, I'm going to do my next film when I can afford film, and I'm going to do this big thing, and I'm going to do all the, you put those hurdles of, like, I've got to do something bigger and better to progress. I remember, it actually was my granddad died, really, and I remember cleaning out his house, and someone, I can't remember the link of it, but it was something like, someone had said, hey, do you want to just enter this, like, short film festival? It's a 48-hour film challenge where you can just do a film. And I was thinking, God, that sounds like a nightmare, making a film from start to finish in 40 hours. Sounds horrendous. But I was like, fuck it. Like, my granddad just died. Like, well, what's the harm? Like, everyone's got 40 hours. Everyone's on the same thing. Like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And weirdly, that 40-hour film, we ended up winning the regional one, get the finals or something. It was like, it turned out great. But it forced me as a filmmaker. It was like the first time when I was like, right, I've got time to decide shot for shot what it is, or I've got time to kind of imagine all these things, which I think early on, I would have thought, what's the best shot for this bit? What's the best shot for that bit? It was more like, how do I tell the story? And I think that's a different mindset, right? If you just think about the minimalist way to cover that element of story, I think that is probably even now how I start approaching everything. So I'll look at a scene now, back then I'll probably list it shot for shot and I'll break it down. And it makes it more daunting for you, right? If you think, all right, I want to see this in that shot, see that in that shot. I would think, I would be thinking where and how I'd want the camera to cut and what the result would be. And that took a lot longer. And I did that in the tournament. And I ended up kind of being, it's stressful because that's not actually a good way, I don't think necessarily of, it's good in one way that you get these shots that you imagine and some of them are nice. But it's not very efficient, whereas I think what I transferred to do more was, I remember, I think Danny Boyle said this. He said, look at a scene and look at the minimal, if you could only do one shot, how would you play that scene out? And what is that? The minimum version of it, and start there and then kind of build around it and see what you can get out of that first setup, and then look at what you really need to kind of cut into it. And I think that's what I do now. I look at it I look at it more on a coverage point of view to tell the story. What do I really need to do? But I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it, Jeff? I stay in the process. I think now, because I'm prepping a film right now, right? And I think this I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at the script and see in my mind what the kind of general aesthetic tone of what I want it to be. Not massively specific, not I want this to be like an 18 that creeps up this thing and meets them there. I kind of look at it more I'd like this scene to, if it's to do something for the scene, I want this one to be kind of intimate in their space or whatever, right? I'd look at how to cover that and achieve that, I suppose. Or I want this one to give us a respite of a wide, lonely thing. Then that kind of feeds into my thought of how to cover it.
And when you are shooting, how much of that changes on the day? Was it?
Yeah, I think with action, it usually has to be very well planned in terms of. I think there's just not enough time normally to do good action. I think I've never been in a shoot really where there's been a studio level time frame where you can kind of shoot what you want ultimately. I've always been on those shoots of independent shoots where you don't have enough time, and if you want to make it look really good, you have a very tight time frame to achieve that. So I've tended to find that action, I have to kind of think about that thing of what's my setups to make this work, so I'm going to end up in the edit with the components I need. and then I usually have to kill half of those babies because I'm never going to get them, and I try and make those compromises on my shot list before I get to an action sequence, thinking, well, I'll probably capture that beat in this setup, and if I don't, I'm going to have to add an extra special pickup for that moment and shit like that, you know. So I try and break action down into specific beats that I'll need to read and register and edit. But I'll try my very best to let as much of the scene play out as I can, because I know that like I'm going to capture twice as much good shit that I didn't plan for, that just naturally happens, as opposed to what I specifically think I'll get. Whereas, yeah, before that, I think I really kind of, early on, I would try and do it shot for shot, and that's kind of, it's not very efficient, really, is it? If you're trying to think about everything.
I think that's inexperience. You know,
yeah, it is. Yeah,
shot for shot. When you're talking about like, sure, when you're on set, you know, you can have those lens conversations. You know, or, you know, like it should be an 18 or a 25 or whatever that lens is. But you know, if you're scouting and you're using that you know, terminology, I don't think you're really reacting to what's going on.
Yeah,
you're forcing the action into the shot as opposed to making the shot work for the action. I think that's
you're right.
I think it's two completely different things.
Yeah, and it's true.
Two different types of movies.
And I think that's true on early films, right? Early short films often look that way. They'll have this kind of wonky aesthetic, and I think that's because of that. Yeah, you think, because you see finished films, and you think, all right, I want these, you know, you look at Terminator 2, or you look at Aliens, or you look at whatever film you're referencing, right? And you'll be like, oh, it's got this, then it goes to that, then it goes to that. Whereas I think the more experience, as you kind of discover on set where you're shooting, you realize, oh, actually, that setup will cover me for all these medium shots of that character, and I can incorporate this piece of it, that piece of it. And so I guess now, I think like you, having been on set with you, I think there's more confidence, right? You like play a scene out, try and get it to work so the characters and all the blocking is real, and then look at that scene and decide how best to cover it, given the parameters you've got to construct.
Yeah. And then you can always have your special shots, you know, as well, that you can, you know, put in at the end as well. Yeah. At the beginning, however you
but then again, maybe, what do we know? There's an element of like, maybe like the way to do it is not that. Like I'd be interesting, and I'd be very curious, like when you talk to people, like what the different processes are, and whether there's a difference as well with TV and film, because I feel like film tends to be probably more of a dismantled process, whereas TV is born out of efficiency and that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to watch anything that Spielberg does. I mean, it's the way he uses the proscenium, you know, and has one actor walk into one thing and, you know, walk into. I mean, it depends on tonally if the project suits that style.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you wouldn't shoot like a Francois Truffaut movie that way.
Yeah.
You know, there's two completely different things.
Yeah,
so,
totally. Yeah.
You know, Akira Kurosawa, everybody, you know, you've got to find. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, what represents you and your sensibility, and make that sing. Really.
Yeah, and I think the truth is, there's also like a secret power thing where the other part of like independent filmmaking that I think I've come to realize at least is the more there's some secret advantages of efficiencies, right? If you consciously choose to shoot something in a more efficient way and save a bit of time, say here on an action movie, right? And shoot, like, know that you can shoot that scene, like, you know, in how you might if it was a TV scene, but know that it's still going to look like world class as that anyway, right? Because certain kind of scenes just naturally play out in that way. If you know you can get away with that and more efficiently shoot this, and it might not be the way that Scorsese's going to do that scene, but it'll still tell the story and still do its worth. And then you kind of save your kind of powder or your resources for other parts of it. What you can then do is like achieve little miracles where you're making like a film that looks a lot bigger than it does for a lot less. And what I've discovered is that if you do that, without sounding pretentious, it's like, as an artist, you get a lot more control. Like there is, if you know, really, people fear spending money, and if you can do, it's like what I noticed when I did Final Score, actually. I felt like that's a film that kind of tries to position itself as a middle budget film, but it's really for very little money, right? So a lot of pressure falls on, say, my shoulders to deliver that film to not, so it looks bigger than it really is. But I also noticed, because of that, and because it's independent, and because you kind of because everyone almost has to trust you that you're going to deliver that film to look a certain way, it also gives you more freedom to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do. So like any controversial jokes or kind of like a tone, you get a bit more, there's a lot more kind of, you can really make it more yours, and you're less behest of like a studio or all these outside parties that would normally partake. If I was doing Final Score at a studio movie and it was really like $30 million, there is no way I would have been getting sign off on certain things during that movie. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and so you kind of, there's a creative advantage on the other side of a compromised budget that actually I've learned is like, embrace that and go for that and be the one, do the controversial things sometimes that is different, because you have a chance to do that in that environment.
Yeah, exactly. Where you wouldn't if it was a studio.
Yeah, totally. Like, and I don't know about you, but I like, never say never, but the way that certainly tent poles are going, and the way like it would have been a dream come true. And I'll say this with the caveat that if anyone asked me to do Star Wars, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But that used to be my dream, right? That would be my dream, where it's like, oh God, I'd love to direct a Star Wars or something cool like that. I honestly don't have that dream anymore, because I feel like that process of delivering a film like that, I would like to be part of that team, sure, and I think it would be an interesting experience, but it's definitely not your film. It's not like it's George Lucas, not like George Lucas did it, and not like Spielberg did any of his films, or Cameron did any of his films, that you are not, it's really a very different gig, and it's, and they do a great job of them, and the producers and everyone involved does a great job, but if you compare that to like a Matthew Vaughn who will do his own movie, in his own version, I'd rather be in that camp than be that big studio kind of coverage camp that seems to be happening.
A friend of mine was talking to a DP in one of those movies, and he was asking him what the experience was like, and he said, well, we walked into the set, it was one of those big studio films, walked into the set, and we looked at the shot, and I said, maybe, a 32 mil is better than a 40 here. Yeah. Because, you get be a lot closer, more intimate with the actors and what have you. And the director had to stop him and say, well, actually, it's got to be 40 mil because that's what we budgeted for. Because, of course, it's not just shooting the actor, you're shooting the multi-layers of the special effects that's taking place beyond the green screen and everything else.
And then it's it's depressing.
It's, you do lose a lot of creativity in those situations. But then, you gain it in many other places as well, because you get to do things that, that you don't normally get to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Like I say, if my phone rings and it's Star Wars, I'm hardly going to be saying no thanks. I want more creative freedom. I'll be like, no, I'll be straight on the I'll be straight on the Millennium Falcon. But it's interesting. I think filmmaking's turning a corner in that, like, there's definitely going to be. Like, I really believe that like content's gone through this strange thing where it's trying to kind of balance itself out in terms of theatrical and streaming and DVD, and every kind of the exhibiting of stuff is at a point now where people want new content. You can't just keep recycling everything. But I would love, like, if you look at the 90s for movies, like what movies came out in the 90s and what ground was broken and all this, because I think the truth is, like, stories, like, that's how. Films are good for spreading and understanding kind of cultural complexities and exploring kind of, the human aspects of everything ultimately, right? Despite the candy wrapper of nonsense that we put everything in. And I think it's a great way to understand one another properly. And I think that's, if we can do that, that's the good thing about films, right? We can do that. We can all be in a better place than maybe today. But
wouldn't be too difficult.
No, I tell you what, the bar is freaking low on him, man.
Let's just jump back to a couple of things.
Yes.
So let's just think. So you've obviously directed 2 more movies. You have another movie. You've produced 2 movies. One with Bruce Willis, the other one being Mara. Your horror movie.
For working on a film with Bruce Willis was a horror movie for me, just so you know.
Well, tell me. So what are ups and downs? What are your most memorable moments? If you had to handpick like 3 moments out of those,
experiences.
4 experiences.
Yeah, I think. A huge up was working with De Niro. I would say working with Robert De Niro and the experience of that was incredible. Like and I was hugely fortunate. I was like in this slump of not done a movie since Tournament. I kept kind of turning down a lot of things because initially, like, you get signed with an agent, you go through this thing of like, you're the hot stuff, but you don't realize you're the hot stuff, or you've got heat, but you don't realize you've got heat, right? And so I was kind of like, I was looking for the perfect project that was everything that was wrong with the Tournament, or the opposite of what was wrong with the Tournament, and I tried to. And I just couldn't find it because there's no such thing as a perfect project. And I also didn't really know what I was looking for. And then eventually, I got this script where I was told De Niro was looking to do it, but he wanted to talk to the director. I think Lionsgate just fired the director that was planned to be on it because they didn't like his last film, maybe. And then...
it's a good start.
Yeah. And do you want to put your hat in the ring? And basically, are you interested in, if you're interested in the movie, would you be able to talk to Robert De Niro on the phone? And I immediately was like, I think I just want to talk to Robert De Niro on the phone.
It doesn't matter what the script's like.
Yeah, it's a bucket list thing to do. It's like, I absolutely want to talk to De Niro. Of course, Skype with De Niro actually it was. And I read the script and I remember thinking, like, I liked a lot about the script, but I remember De Niro's part was really not very well developed, let's say. And I was like, and I remember saying, I really think this part, like, it feels like it's been shoehorned in, like, honestly, like De Niro's part. It feels like it's been, like, roughed in a way that doesn't tie into the rest of the movie. And I'll be honest, I don't think De Niro's going to do it. I really don't think he's going to do it. And they were like, well, he wants to do the call, so do you want to do the call? And I was like, sure, okay. But what's everyone like with the script? And like, well, they're happy to change it if De Niro wants to change it, but however. And I remember thinking, like, and petrified to speak to De Niro because it's Robert De Niro, right? And in terms of being starstruck, it's like you can't get bigger, I think. And I remember waiting for him to Skype me, and just sat by my computer, kind of in a shirt, like thinking, what's my background image looking like, and what's he going to think, and all these things. I'm sweating profusely, and he befriends me, and there's his Skype address, and then it rings, and I answer it, and he's there in a hotel room in Washington. And he's clearly just reading the script, like probably for the first time, I'm guessing, right? And we say hello, and then he's like, "Yeah, Scott, I don't really want to waste your time, because I'll be honest, I reread the script and I don't think I'm going to do this project." And so he immediately starts off with it like, "I don't want to do this," and I didn't know what to say. And in one hand, I had the producer in my ear who'd kind of hammered down the phone like earlier that day saying, just tell him you love it. Tell him it's going to be great. Tell him it's going to be brilliant. Just make sure he does the film. And in my other mind, I was just like, he's totally right. And I don't want to argue. So in the end, I opted for honesty. And I said, I'll be honest. I don't blame you. I thought the same thing when I read it. Like, I think the character's kind of clearly been adjusted and isn't working, and there's all kinds of problems with it. It's pretty, I don't blame you. I don't think you should. And he kind of laughed, and then we talked, and then I pitched him. I guess we got talking, and I pitched him a version that I thought that I liked, that was honest from my point of view, which was actually about how much you do sacrifices and how they catch up to you in the end. And it was actually really about how much I'd sacrificed during the tournament, not to make it all about me and my film career, but it was about I felt like I'd sacrificed so much on the tournament, and I'd kind of missed out on like family stuff, and especially now I had kids, I was missing the kids whenever I was doing film stuff, and it was really like a heavy price to pay for something else that you kind of do career-wise. And I told him I thought it'd be interesting to do that as a character story and something that's about fatherhood ultimately. And we got talking, and I think he had similar views, and he really liked it. And at the end of that call, he basically said, like, look, I'd love to work on this further. Like, I'm going to be in New York on Tuesday. This was like Sunday. Like, do you think there's any chance you could get to New York and we can work on it together at my place, my office? And I was like, let me just check my calendar. Yeah. I'm having a child born, but don't worry about that. So I flew out there, and I remember as a turning point, it was like I was really nervous to see him, obviously, because it's Robert De Niro. Even though I'd spoke to him, I was still like, oh my God, I'm in New York. I'm about to sit down with De Niro in his office and work through this like character and story, and to the point where like I even then I didn't have that much confidence. I remember being outside his office really early because I was on the jet lag time thing, having a bagel in the breakfast shop opposite Tribeca, and it was like 9:00, and I only had a shirt and stuff. And it was raining, I remember. Anyway, I nip across the street and I go to the entrance of Tribeca Film, and a guy behind the counter is there. He's like, "Who are you here to see?" In the New York kind of like confident way. And I'm like, "I've got a 9:00 with Mr. De Niro," and he looked at me and he went, "No one's up there. Clear out," basically, give me the nod to get the hell out of there. And I was like, okay. And so I ended up walking down like the street in the rain, and I'd like been kicked out by the doorman, and I was like, oh man, this didn't go well. And then I get a call from the agencies, and they're like, oh, there's been a mix-up. And then I go back and I meet Bob like in his office, and I give him a hug. And I remember when I hugged him, he was so soft and cuddly and lovely that it was like he was just like meeting like he was like my dad or something, you know what I mean? And it was.
Were you dripping wet?
Yes, I was soggy. It was like, sorry, I'm soggy, Bob. No, he was so lovely and welcome and just so normal, and he clearly knew how to handle people to not kind of, to make people feel comfortable. He was just a nice guy, and it just got rid of me being starstruck. But the development of that script with him to really like carve the character and make it work was, I was obviously petrified. I was even like nervous when he phoned from then. There was still like a nervous thing of like, it's just, he's so kind of high caliber that it's, you're filled with fear. And I think anyone who isn't is not being honest about it, right? So, but as you work through that and you work with someone, you realize they just got the same endeavor that you're searching for, right? Which is to do something good and not have it suck, ideally. So he was very gracious, and the whole experience of doing a film with him, he just put 200% of what he should have done or what he needed to do, because he really wanted it to work. And I found, yeah, that was great. That was a great experience. And he made me think about character. He honestly made me think from that point forward, every script I've ever worked on, I thought, okay, if Bob was reading this, how would he look at that character, and what's interesting about that character? And I think if you look through the characters in the script through the prism of the actor playing them and think that way, it really helps you really focus on whether you got it there or not.
I do that when I'm blocking, actually, when I'm shooting a TV show, because I've worked many times on this one show, and this one very experienced actor used to go, so what if I do it this way? And, because he would come in, he obviously had his way of doing things as well.
I like how you're not naming anyone here. You're being very anonymous here, Jeff. But you got to be more dangerous, Jeff. Tell us who it is. Come on, baby.
So I would work out how I wanted to do it, or how I thought it should be done when I read the script,
right.
So what I thought this actor, and what I thought everybody, how they would react to the situation in a place. So I would go in often with like 3 different ways of blocking a scene. And then, of course, when we did The Oath, we worked against that, in a completely different way, because that kind of fed into the style of the show.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you say that about what's that actor getting out of that role if they're reading that script. They're looking at their role, and they're looking at how viable it is,
and they're reading,
how important it is.
They're reading 3 things: the role, the viability, and the check. Decide which one.
The check comes first.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what Liam Cunningham used to say. He said, the first thing I read, I just have to read the check. That's the thing. But I think that totally. And it helps you, right? Like, you try and hold on to that and say, like, okay, that's a good way of learning that. And and weirdly that, like I say, even though I coin it it's a writing thing. It again, like you say with the blocking and everything, it's really, if you really think about, characters are integral, obviously, telling your story, and they're arguably more important in a lot of ways than the story itself. So I think you, if you force yourself into those perspectives, it really helps. Did you find, like, I don't know if you find this, but I found myself nervous to really let myself into those places of acting. So, like, as an actor, I like, even writing, actually, when I was just directing, I'd look at, like, I'd be scared of writers and writing, like they have a magical power, because I didn't understand it. And then when I realized, actually, no, it's an extension. It's like writing and editing are really just like filmmaking. It's just another kind of position of filmmaking. And the same with acting. Like the best actors that I've worked with, and I've been very lucky to work with some really good ones, they are storytellers. They know how to tell a story, just like we're trying to do as directors, and writers are trying to do as writers. And I think that is what, and because you're all trying to tell a story, if you all try, it makes it easier to get in each other's kind of lane, in a sense, just to get that perspective of it, is to say, right, we're telling the story, and to tell the story you need to do this, and we need to do this, and I think the more you talk about it, or I've found, the more I talk about it in that detail and that level of, like, rather than going back to the thing about camera stuff, actually, rather than trying to tell an actor how to act, it's like, what is the intention we're trying to make from this scene or this moment, right? And is it reading, is a question I think the director should be answering, right? Like, is it reading that? Am I reading that? And it might be a disagreement between you and the actor. The actor might think it's readable, just like I've seen people, I've had it next to a monitor with someone saying, like, yeah, I got it. And I'll be like, I don't know if you got it. It's like, and it's a hard thing to...
Well, because they're reading something into it that you can't necessarily see.
Yeah.
But it's like De Niro.
He's a very reactive actor. Like, he really feeds off his environment and the scene as a whole. So I found that, like, he, and what that does is it kind of brings the whole thing to life, and the whole thing needs to work. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one's telling De Niro to raise an eyebrow and look surprised, are they? It's like, you got to kind of help him feel surprised, so the camera registers that he's surprised, right? If that's the way you're doing it. So, and I think he, and that honesty is, and that's what people tap into, and that's why he's such a great performer. It's like it reflects that off you, doesn't it? And I think, it's a very interesting. And then actually to go to a worse story, like if you want to bring up Bruce Willis as a content on that one, I think I kind of like I think one of the on the flip of all that is like the and I'm going to say this with the caveat of, everyone has their own kind of thing they do, and for all their different reasons, and people make, and making any film is a joy in a sense, and a privilege, right? So like, that's all there. But my experience of Bruce, unfortunately, was he kind of riffs from doing let's be honest, one of the best films, one of my favorite films, it was Die Hard, right? So it's like, seeing Bruce's John McClane naturally puts you in that place of like, he's a hero, and he's probably a hero for many people, and it's probably hard for him to really be that person for everyone forever, right? Or play at that level. But yeah, I had a poor experience in that. Clearly, he didn't really want to be in the movie that I was producing, and Bruce came in, and he's basically got this setup where he comes in to essentially like, as essential component of the film, coming in to star stunt casting. So essentially Bruce will roll in, he'll do a couple of days, and it's kind of the extreme end of like capitalist movie making, right? In the obviously expensive stars tend to kind of get squeezed on days to try and make it cheap enough to well, not cheap, but affordable enough that you can have that star in your movie. And so the bigger the star, the less days they'll naturally have, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of the economics of making a film. But when it gets to Bruce, he kind of had got a system down, and he'll come along for one day, and then they'll shoot it in a way where he can act like 20 minutes of movie, but then you'll spend a week after that with a Bruce double to kind of fill in the gaps and shoot the rest of the scenes. It's like, it's a horrible way to make a movie. Yeah. And Bruce came, and I kind of, and you always have high hopes that your dreams aren't going to be shattered. But when he got there, it quickly became apparent he had never read the script once before flying in on his private jet. And he literally read from, he'd requested these guys come in with a monitor, and he literally would read off the monitor the dialogue kind of for the first time ever. And that's when he was discovering the dialogue. And so it couldn't be more phoned in, and it was just depressing, and it has this kind of poisonous effect on everyone as a whole, on the crew, sadly, and the cast, because if someone really doesn't give a shit at that level, because he really didn't give a shit, and I don't know whether there's some reverse psychology that maybe he tries to bomb movies that he's playing those kind of parts in and separate them from his higher level movies where he actually does do a good job. I wonder that, but as a filmmaker involved in that process, and someone who loved the original material, and working with directors and people who really care about it, it's very depressing to have someone do that on a movie. And again, it comes back to this point of you've got to be careful with people's feelings, and not just be if you just go the kind of full commercial capitalist route, you're kind of you're stabbing people, you're hurting people and their love of it all, and it's very and so that experience was depressing. It was all,
what a shame. He can be so great when he wants to be,
when he can be bothered to be. I don't know. And M. Night Shyamalan tends to get a great performance out of him, right? So and again, I think he has done some great performances, and look, the guy's, it's his life. He can, if he wants to do that, it's his choice. And if people pay him $3 million to go in for a day, who can blame him? But it, it's a shame. And I think you just got to kind of, and that's why the more honest everyone is up front on a movie of what you're asking of everyone and what you're agreeing to, the better, right? Because then you're getting hopefully what you planned for, and you'll be able to make something good. But so there you go. One good one happy story, one sad one, Jeff.
No, that's perfect. All right, well, this takes us to our final part of our show. Okay. Now, for our listeners that you've kind of answered this already, but for the people that do want to try to get into the business, who might be just leaving school or have aspirations to maybe be a cameraman and then a director, or they don't quite understand. I mean, what would you say to them? Would you suggest that going to film school is a good option, or just making shorts, or how is it different now to the way it was when you were starting out?
Yeah, I think now, I'll be honest, I think now is amazing. I would love to have grown up in the now time of filmmaking, because the access to tools that you have is at such a level, and even visual language filmmaking just generally baked into everyday life with things like TikTok and everything. It's a different, I think we're gonna end up having incredible filmmakers come out of this period, right? People who want to do films, because they're just from being born, you have access to kind of video cameras, and you know what I mean. And again, they're
After Effects, all the stuff that we didn't have at that age.
The things that didn't really, weren't easy to come by. But I would say that the biggest thing for sure, which I think is, obviously, watching films and getting involved with anything, and all that, I imagine if you want to be a filmmaker or portioned in the process, you would love doing it. Make sure, if you genuinely love doing it, then the biggest thing is just doing it, is making films. Because I think what comes out of just making films with whatever you have leads to exercising them exercising the muscles, skills, and craftsmanship that is hard to, which is really hard for even a film school to understand and explain. You know what I mean? So all the things that you'll pick up between just seeing what emotional effect something has on people by kind of putting it together, even if it's done like in crappy light and all that kind of stuff, and you know what I mean, with non-actors, and you're like, oh god, this is gonna be awful. But just don't be afraid to fail, basically, because I think in just being not afraid to do it, you know, just going forward and doing it, just do it, basically, because you can't. There's no, you know, just don't be afraid of yourself failing, and I think that progresses you onward in much bigger steps, and the fear stops most people. That's the difference between, I think, kind of filmmakers that make it and don't, is like the ones that were too scared or insecure, or egos were, and that's the thing. If you've got a big ego, there's a risk that you are scared of, you know, it creates your own problem, right? But if you, I think that just filmmaking is the way to do it. And like, again, anything, I know people say it and they ignore it, and I probably would ignore it if I was a kid. If someone said to me, "Oh, just use like paper drawings, or use crappy camera and all this stuff," like, you kind of think, "Oh no, that's not the way," but it actually is, because you do 10 films, and I'll guarantee that 11th is many times better than the first, and. Yeah, and so I think through it's just like exercising the muscle. I think just do it, and that's what I would say to anyone. And don't use the excuse. Just dive yourself in, and you'll get out of it. And don't worry so much, and then that's the way to do it.
I went for a talk with James Cameron in London years ago, and somebody asked him the same question, and he said, "Take the word aspiring out of filmmaker." Yeah. Because if you just start making films, no matter what the budget, you're a filmmaker. Yeah. Whether you're making it for $10, you know, or $10 million. Yeah. And just from them, you're negotiating your budget. Yeah, that's way better advice, right? That's what Rashad said. But but that's true though, isn't it? It's like you are filmmaking, and that's the reality. No, but I think what your point is very important, because a lot of people trying to get into the business want to make a great short film. And that might stop them from making the short film, or it might take them, you know, they might be trying to raise money, which seems crazy for a short film. You know, you could put a short film together for nearly nothing now. But rather than looking at the experiences you might get from making 9 bad short films, and learning from it, because the process should be as important, if not more important, than the end result. You know, and then the end result will come from that. Then you don't, like, the fearful part is you don't know where the end result is, right? And I think you know, and I think people are scared to like, it's a combination of scariness and also if you believe you have a natural talent, you're scared to not have that be true. And I think when people say they have a natural talent, do they have a natural? Like, yes, you can be attuned to something, but I tend to find, like, all those people with natural talent have been doing, whether consciously or subconsciously, you've just done it for a long time. You know, like you don't have a baby pick up a paintbrush and just amazing. It tends to be the kid that, as a baby, played with a paintbrush for 2 years. Turns out when they're 4 can actually paint a picture. It wasn't talent, it was time. And that 10,000, that idea of like 10,000 hours to become an expert of anything, I think that's true. That kind of feeds into this idea, right? It's just the more you do it, like, if I could say to my younger self anything, it's just like, make more. You know what I mean? Just make more crap. Actually, it would probably be what I would tell my younger self, because my younger self would be like, I don't want to make crap. It'd be like, make more crap, because the crap is actually going to get you there, and will get you there a lot quicker. That's what I would tell myself. That's great advice. Make more crap. That's my advice. Great way to end the podcast. Sweet. Scott, man, thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. Are you on social media? Can people find you on Instagram? Hopefully not. I'm hiding.
Not really. Am I on social media? I've got like 4 posts in the last like century. It's yeah. Am I on social media? I'm ish.
And you have another movie coming out. You're about to start shooting.
Well, yeah.
In 4 weeks,
You're optimistically telling me it's coming out. I haven't shot it yet, so let's see. But yeah, no, I'm shooting. I'm about to shoot a movie. So yeah. So I'll hopefully by the time you listen to this, I've finished that movie, or I haven't. In which case, like retrospectively, it's ironic that I'm talking about a movie I'm not doing. But
what's the name of the movie?
So it's called Fall, and it's about and it revolves around the fear. The fear of falling, the fear of heights. It's 2,000 feet up, nowhere down. Boom.
Nice.
Yeah, that tagline's going to change, I'm sure.
It'll be called something.
It'll be called, yeah. Someone else would have directed it. I'll have been fired by that point, so so just enjoy. But hopefully.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.
Great evening. And that's the show. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can find me at jeffthomas.com or at jeffthomas on Twitter and Instagram.
Remember 19 Media.